Hi guys, welcome back. Just to specify for anyone who happens to stumble upon this video, this is not a medical astrology class. If you haven't seen the first two videos, then go back to the beginning of the playlist and watch those because this video is very specifically how medical astrology backs up my latitude theory for the Sun Leo rulership. Okay, just to explain why there are only like 5 slides in this, because there are only a couple random slides interjected throughout. This all stemmed from a slideshow that I was making to be able to offer to my massage clients. So I had already created these slides and gotten this far before I decided that I really needed to stop and make the YouTube videos. And now finishing this one is the only thing holding us back from releasing the first three, so we're just going to get the information out and worry about aesthetics later. So anyways, let's start with this slide because it was really what set the whole thing off, because I realized that the moon, sun, and Saturn being associated with the pole had a lot of associations with medical astrology, because in medical astrology, the sun is the spine, the moon is cerebral spinal fluid, and the Saturn is overall skeletal structure. So I realized that that right there had a very strong premise to being associated with medical astrology. So I looked into it, and there are lots of associations that I believe may have originated partially from this logic. Let's go through a couple examples right now, planet by planet. Okay, so the sun, which in this theory is the crown chakra, the North Pole, and is also, in my belief, the day part of polar day. So we've already covered the parallel with the spine, but I believe that its relationship with the heart has a lot to do with it being the concentration of the most direct sunlight, of it being the heart of the sunlight, that it has that specific association. If we follow this logic and assume that it's a direct reference to its location at the pole, this also makes sense with it being the significator for cardiovascular circulation, because it would be controlling that axial precession and the movement of that pole. And then, of course, the core vitality and overall life force make perfect sense for the same reason, because it's what the whole rulership is based off of. I have no idea what the deal with the eyes is. I just think that it's strangely specific, and I wonder if looking at the logic of the Earth placement will give us any insight into this at some future point. Okay, now for sun medical imbalances, the low vitality and poor circulation are already explained by what we just discussed. And then I think the fevers can be explained by the polar day comparison, because it is an episode of heat. Okay, now the moon, which in this theory is the third eye chakra, still is the North Pole, and is also related to the night portion of the polar day, polar night phenomenon, in my opinion. I think this association with the darkness helps to explain the association with the mind and the unseen. And to reiterate the point about the polar day, polar night phenomenon being an episodic event, I think this also helps to explain its association with cycles and hormonal cycles. The only note that I want to add to this slide with the fluid imbalances is that the ice caps help to keep the planet's fluid regulation in check. This slide is pulled from the opposite order it was written in originally, because I'm going to bring up again with Saturn that I believe that the ice caps have comparison to coatings and coverings and protection and those sorts of symbolisms. And so since the moon is the ice cap over the mind, it's the protective covering for the mind. That is why it is representative of the myelin sheath. Okay, so Mercury, which in this theory is the throat chakra and also the region just below the Arctic. Mercury is associated with the respiratory function, which makes sense because here it is the throat chakra, and it also makes sense because the lungs are located above the diaphragm. Mercury also signifies brain, which makes sense because of its proximity to the moon and the sun, but I would be so interested to see an accurate homunculus breakdown of this chart. I thought it was really interesting that it has a really strong association with the gut brain, because in the chakra system, the throat chakra pairs with the sacral chakra. And Jupiter is known to be associated with the gut and digestion. So here that connection rings true as well. And then it signifies the tongue, because it is the throat chakra here, and it is all about speech and voice and communication. For that same reason, an imbalance can also mean speech issues, which is the only imbalance I'm going to highlight at the moment. Okay, Venus, which in this theory is the heart chakra and also the pleasant area above the equator. The only point I actually want to bring up here is that Venus governs the Venus system and the return of the blood flow to the heart. Now, when I heard this, I was like, I'm sorry, did you just say that Venus rules the Venus system? So, of course, I went to look at the etymology of Venus to see if it had anything to do with veins. And it didn't. It was all stuff to do with love and desire, just typical Venus things. So then I went the opposite approach and looked at the etymology of vein, and it turns out the origin is unknown. So it's my suggestion that the root of vein and Venus might actually stem from this relationship. I'm sure I'm not the first person to have that thought. I didn't look into it. Okay, let's go to Mars, which in this theory is the solar plexus chakra and also the equator. Mars is heat and inflammation, typical equator things. And it's also physical drive and muscles, I believe, because it is the bulkiest part of the planet and it is also the part of the planet that travels the fastest. The equator has to actually physically move more distance than the poles do in order to keep up as the Earth rotates around her axis each day. And for this same reason, it is the vigor of blood circulation. Mars imbalances include high fevers, sudden inflammation, and burns. Again, all equator heat-related references. Okay, Jupiter, which in this theory is the sacral chakra and also the pleasant climate zone south of the equator. So Jupiter signifies the liver, which makes total sense because that is the organ directly below the diaphragm. And it also signifies expansion of self, both with the sacral chakra energetically and with the fat physically. And finally, Saturn, which in this theory is the root chakra and also the South Pole. I feel like this opens up a whole new world for Saturn. So there are so many things that we could say, but let's start with a couple. We've already addressed how it's the skeletal structure because of the pole association, but I think many of the things it signifies can be explained by the ice cap association. Teeth, nails, and hair are all that hard outer accessory type feeling, the same way the ice cap is. Saturn is the only one who rules two houses next to each other, so he's the only one who owns that much consecutive land mass. Therefore, he's the significator of skin, which is also the largest organ and is also the coverings of both things. Also, because he's the only one who rules two houses next to each other, he's the only one who rules that connection between them. Therefore, he is the significator of connective tissue and joints. Okay, now on to Saturn imbalances in medical astrology. Saturn signifies long-lasting or slow onset illnesses, which are both perfect descriptors for the polar night comparison. And then even if poor circulation is not a reference to the speed of the surface area of the Earth, stiffness, poor circulation, and restriction of fluid are all analogous to the ice cap. Okay, again, we're going to keep it just that superficial for now because this concludes the three that I wanted to release together, and now we can finally get it out there. So let's be done with it. And I don't know what's going to come quite next, but like, subscribe, turn on your notifications if you are interested in this theory and would like to see where we go with this next. I do have many more things to say. I'm just not super sure on the order we're going to cover them. So stay tuned and I'll see you there.